Renegade Crowns are arguably the 11th army in the game. They are basically the Dogs of War equivalent that I think we're going to be getting this edition. They're a little open-ended in that more things can be added to them as more Dogs of War units get added to the game, whether or not they have a huge impact. But what's interesting to me about this army is I don't think it's easy to evaluate. I think it's very interesting because I'm looking at it and going, I think this is good, but I can't tell you that it's definitely good. And I think if anyone is telling you that it's definitely good or bad, I'm not sure they've given it enough thought or really evaluated all of the options, because there is a lot of different stuff that you can do with this book. So let's go through, break it down unit by unit, try and work out what the hell are we doing with Renegade Crowns. This video is brought to you by the TSN Arena, the #1 place to go for Old World and Age of Sigmar tournaments here in Nottingham. Rob runs a wide range of events, from 500-point forays all the way up to 2,600-point mega battles, where single models like dragons have a less pronounced effect on the game and you see bigger bricks of infantry. Of course, there's still the normal 2,000-point battles, but even in there there's some room for experimentation, with fan-favourite events like the river battles going incredibly quickly. The TSN Arena is located on the outskirts of Nottingham City Centre near the Motorpoint Arena, and it is conveniently located in the middle of plenty of parking spots within walking distance of multiple hotels and two great places to go for food, including Sneinton Market, which has a wide range of options. So, if you're interested in going to a venue where there's plenty of table space, the comfiest chairs that I've been in at any venue, and free drinks all weekend, go to www.tsnarena.com to buy your tickets today. Link in the description. I want to be clear, I really like Renegade Crowns. My initial read on them is that maybe a little bit lower on damage, but very, very good at scoring. So I think they're going to be quite a fun army to play, and I think they're going to have quite a high skill cap. They're one of the armies that you can probably get a lot of skill expression out of. There's some really interesting units in here, specifically Hiling Outriders, I think are incredible. We'll talk about those when we get to them. But the way that it works is this is a new army, so as far as I'm concerned, and unless it's rules differently, if you're playing teams, that doesn't have to be international level. You know, Warhammer World has team events. We're seeing team events pop up more and more. There's a team event happening in November for Saffron Slam that I will be covering. Loads of team events are happening, and I think it's worth thinking about it in that context, because this could go alongside. It doesn't take up Bretonnian slot, it doesn't take up Empire slot, but it can do some of the things that both army does. With that said, I think this army is significantly closer to Empire than it is to Bretonnia. I think it's really an Empire-like army with some aspects of Bretonnia. So we'll look at it more through that lens. I don't think the things that you get from Bretonnia that are very exciting, which is really the very killy characters, you know, the Pegasus Knights. We don't have that aspect here, but we do have two sort of lists of magic items that we can pull from, as long as we pay the tax. But fortunately, our characters are very, very cheap anyway. So paying a couple, 20-point tax to be able to take items from a certain list, not the end of the world at all. And they do come with some other upgrades as well. Starting off, just looking at the percentages we've got here. 50% on characters, very normal. 25% minimum on core, very normal as well. Special is a little bit lower. You can only take a third of your army as special, but in Old World, you never take 1,000 points of special, realistically. I don't think I've seen any armies do that. It's more you're putting your points into, going for as much character points as possible, typically. Rare is the same at 25%, but then you can have up to 33% of your army with mercenaries. Now, unfortunately, you still have to roll on the misbehaving mercenary table, which I don't like. I do find that to be an issue, and I was hoping that there'd be some sort of, given that this is a whole mercenary army together, hoping that it would, not suffer from that in the way that the Jade Fleet doesn't suffer from it, but alas, here we are. We haven't got that rule. So, character-wise, we're starting off at 50%, and we've got a couple of interesting things. So first of all, you've got 0-1 Renegade Prince per 1,000 points. This is your Lord-level character. It is not a Lord-level character in terms of output. It's very cheap. It's 75 points at the space cost. We'll look at it in a second. But we haven't really got any big hitters, which does make sense for Empire, but we don't have any monstrous mounts here. We don't have a character that's going to bring 4 or 5, however many attacks that are going to be super meaningful. So we don't have any character beat stick, which is something that I often look for when I'm writing lists, because it's an easy way to bring strength to a list. However, we also do have Renegade Captains and Outcast Wizards uncapped. You can have as many as you like, and in the match play guide, that translates to 3 of each, which I think 3 Outcast Wizards is going to be pretty commonly seen. Unfortunately, you can only have 2, pardon me, you can only have 2 level 3 wizards. So you can't take them up to level 4, they're capped at level 3. So you'll end up with 2 level 3s and a single level 2 if you want to go down that line. I still think that's pretty good. It's not, a major problem for me. While we're talking about this, we do have to acknowledge that the items you can buy for this Army of Infamy, unless you buy some specific upgrades, you can only buy common magic items. You can't buy anything from any of the books. Now, characters can buy upgrades. These upgrades are cheap, that's fine. But anything that goes on units is a little bit more restricted. So while it would be really great to have, the Witch Hunter's Ward on your unit champion for the veteran sellswords, for example, you can't do that. You'd have to put a character in there with, specific upgrades and then also items from the Empire book. So a little bit limiting, but it's not the end of the world. If you're taking common magic items, some of them are still worth looking at. You've got some decent bits and pieces. Maybe you just take a cheap wizard that's got a Ruby Ring of Ruin. That's not, not a bad purchase to go for. Moving into core, we've got 0 to 1 unit of veteran sellswords. I've already talked about these on the channel. We're going to go over them again. I think they're an incredible unit. But 2 at 2,000 points, I think is probably about as many as you'd want to put in, unless you wanted to go really heavy on the armored the armored ranged units, but in that case you can use the sellsword infantry. These are, if you haven't seen them, the analogy is basically the normal state troops and the veteran state troops for Empire, but they come with way more options, so a good build to go with there. Freeblade Knights and Hireling Outriders are the other 2 options we can go in here. I think both of these are pretty good. Freeblade Knights, you lack a little bit in that you don't get to take any of the, you don't get to upgrade them to Knights of the White Wolf, so they're worse Empire cavalry, in my opinion, but they're still pretty solid, they're still pretty cheap, you can equip them in multiple different ways. Finally, in core, you can take Free Company Militia and Empire Archers. I don't think Free Company Militia are particularly good or have a spot. I think Empire Archers are very good, especially if you're playing more of like a skirmishy, scoring-based list, and what you want to do is have just lots of cheap core that can hold objectives. You know that I love having, scoring core skirmish infantry so that you can put them in terrain or partially hide them behind a building. So they're going to be -2, -3, -4 to hit, depending on the modifiers that you're stacking on top of that skirmish there for ballistic skill shooting. Into special, we've got your veteran free blades, and this is kind of your inner circle knight equivalent. I don't mind these at all. I think there's definitely a world we put these in, because we do lack a little bit of punch, so maybe this is something we're going to be looking at, and also combining it with some sort of spells from the Outcast Wizard. I think that could go quite well. We've got 0 to 2 Border Prince mortars per 1,000 points, so theoretically you could take 4, or if you're playing with the match play guide, you're playing with, I guess, 3. I'm still not actually 100% sure how that interaction typically goes. Whatever. Into rare, we've got the Brigands, the Border Prince Brigands. I think this is the world where they live in. They don't typically make it into Bretonnia Exiles lists, but I think this is where we might see them used. They're pretty cheap. They've got a lot of customization. They're sort of like veteran sellswords, but they have a different role and a different set of options that they can be equipped with. You can also take 0 to 1 War Machine per 1,000 points from the following list, which is the Organ Gun and the Bombard. A little bit of a shame that we can't go double Bombard, double Organ Gun, but them's the breaks. It's still absolutely fine. Finally, mercenaries are dogs of war from any arcane journal. So off the top of my head, that is the Imperial Ogres from Empire, the Imperial Dwarves, and the Doomseeker from the Dwarf book. Then we've got the Bone Grinder Giant, and I think there might be one more. If there is, we'll come to it. I'll make sure by the time I'm going through the Dogs of War, I've double-checked through and seen if there is anything else on there. Last but not least, BSB option. You do have to pay 25 points for it, and you can take a single magic standard, which is the on the Renegade Captain. I was wondering if they were going to be able to... When I looked at how this was set up, where they're like a mixture of Empire and Bretonians, I was wondering if they were going to get a free banner, but I guess they're not particularly honourable. They're not really embodying all of the noble virtues that Bretonia have. So yes, you do have to pay for your BSB, and that's fine. That just puts you in line with every other army in the game. Before we get into the actual units, we know that there aren't any magic items in the book. We know that you only get items from the core magic items allowance. However, there are infamous origins, and these tie into the army rules that you get for this Army of Infamy. So we're going to start off looking at the infamous origins, and then we'll go back to the actual full Arcane Journal, or sorry, Army of Infamy special rules for this army, because I think it makes more sense to do it that way, because you'll see what you have to purchase in order to unlock the other rules. So, starting off, we've got the Might of Miragliano, which is 25 points for a character, and these can go on your Renegade Lords or Wizards, so basically that's all of the characters you can purchase. That's an interesting little note, because, you know, just like you can see on the other side of the screen here, that means I can give +1 ballistic skill and a ranged weapon to my wizards. I think that's just something that I might be doing. Anyway, let's go through in order. Might of Miragliano, 25 points. It gives you +1 to your leadership, which is good, because the leadership on the characters is not great. And it also gives you Stubborn and Tillian Stoicism. Tillian Stoicism gives you the ability to basically bestow the Stubborn on a character to the unit that it's joined. I think this is very good. Normally, obviously, Stubborn doesn't bestow on the unit. I think it has to be the majority of the unit has to have Stubborn, or effectively anyway, the character with Stubborn joining does not grant Stubborn to the unit. Tillian Stoicism does, as long as the character is joined before that unit has made their first break test. So you just can't make a break test and then join a character to the unit and give them Stubborn. Stubborn is always the first break test of the game that you have to use this on. 25 points for the Renegade Knight, and this is the Bretonia sort of coded one. For 25 points here, we give you +1 weapon skill and strength, so immediately we're starting to get more superhuman-like ability, where you've got those damsel or lady, infused characters, where you're like, oh, this Baron is equivalent in stats to a Chaos Lord. This is pretty wild. So, +1 weapon skill and strength, which is quite nice, although you still do only have 3 attacks. However, most importantly, it gives you 2 rules. Access to, well, 2 things. Access to the Bretonia magic items, which I think is very good. There's some interesting stuff in there. And then also Noble Disdain and Veteran. Veteran, obviously, fantastic. Do you want to bring the Falconhorn? Falconhorn, not as good as it was, but if you're going to bring it, having it on a veteran character, this is where you want to do it. And then Noble Disdain is basically a Knight's Vow. If you are a cavalry unit, if an infantry unit nearby would cause panic into you, either by being destroyed nearby or being fled through, you just don't take a panic. You're on a horse. You don't care for the peasantry. Very, very Bretonian. So I really like this one. I don't necessarily like it for this top line here, the weapon skill and strength, but I really like it for the veteran and the access to the magical items from Bretonia. Third up, we've got the Noble Outlaw. For 20 points, it is one of the cheaper 2, and this is the Empire-style upgrade. And this is more Nuln adjacent than sort of Grand Army Empire, I think. But it gives you +1 to your ballistic skill and leadership. Anytime I'm getting plus leadership, I'm very happy. It gives you Hold the Line from page 48 of the Forces of Fantasy, which we'll have a look at in a second. Most importantly, gives you magic items from the Empire of Man magic item list in the Forces of Fantasy and the Arcane Journal. So this unlocks quite a lot in terms of your ability to do things, give you upgrades. You can take a lot of stuff there, which is, I think really, really exciting to put into your list. You also get to take just weapons, ranged weapons, which I think is nice, given that you get plus ballistic skill. You can have, for 28 points, a repeater handgun on your Outcast Wizard. Is that going to be super efficient? Probably not. Am I going to, it's the sort of thing that I might cut. If I'm squeezed for points, I might cut that first before I cut anything else. But if you're paying for the ballistic skill, you may as well also put a weapon on there. Some of these are more decent for range. So if you're going into, let's say, a reserve move unit, maybe you just go with a short bow. Yes, it's only a strength 3 shot with no AP, but you're pretty likely to hit it. You also get Ambushes or Scout if you want to, for 10 points per model. And this is fine. This is mostly just so that you don't get left behind if you want to, take some units that have these rules. Gives you a lot of flexibility there, and I think this is going to be sort of my default pick for a lot of the characters that I want to put in, especially BSB, because I think that the Empire standards for this list are typically better than the Bretonian ones. I'm not super bothered about taking Bretonian standards in this army. Now, last but very much not least, we have the Wandering Diestro, and this is probably the one that you might have seen floating around the internet because it's funny. It is funny. The Infamous Origin gives you +2 modifier to your weapon skill. Cool. Okay. Gives you Feint and Dodge. Sweet. That sounds like a cool rule. Can't wait to find out what that one does. You can't take weapons with Strike Last. Slightly less excited. Great weapons are typically the best weapons for non-magical weapons. May take an additional hand weapon at 3 points per model. Amazing. I'm not excited about that at all. Never mind. We're probably paying for this for the Feint and Dodge special rule. So, Feint and Dodge. Once per game, when an enemy model directs its attacks against the model with this special rule, you... I think there was going to be something else there. Now, realistically, if we just have a quick look at the other page, in fact, let me just zoom over there. My assumption is that it's going to be the Wandering Duelist rule that you see here for the army special rules that you can give your brigands. Once per game, models within this unit that enemy models direct their attacks against reroll successful rolls to hit. I'm assuming that's what we're getting on the the Wandering Diestro's special rule, Feint and Dodge. But who knows? Who knows? What will happen? While this is funny, it's not the end of the world. I know people are going to be like, oh, it's a product that's gone to print. They should take more care with their copy editing. And I don't disagree, but I also don't think it's a massive deal. They will, on release an FAQ or a clarification saying this is what it is. If I'm wrong, then you can get your pitchforks out. But it would be bizarre if I am wrong. I'm sure they're just going to say on release, this is what it does. Apologies for not putting it out. Moving on to the Outcast Knights. This is an interesting one. Now, you're going to see a theme here. For every unit or every character in your army that has the Renegade Knight Infamous Origin, 0-1 unit of Freeblade Knights or Veteran Freeblade... God, why can't I talk? Veteran Freeblade Knights may have the Lance Formation and the Noble Disdain special rule for plus 2 points per model. What does this do? This upgrades you to basically Bretonnian Knights of the Realm. This is a pretty good upgrade. Lance formation is very solid. I got really excited about this the first time I saw it, because I was like, oh wow, Veteran Freeblade Knights, they're basically Inner Circle Knights. Being able to get 2 attacks per model in Lance formation, that's something that Bretonnians can only get if they go, they have to commit really hard. They have to go with Grail Knights in the rare slot. Then I just went and double-checked the unit profile for Veteran Freeblade Knights. They only have 1 attack each. That is very sad. So, yeah, I like this. I think it's good. I think there's play with it. I really like the ability to have a lance of models, use them aggressively. They're very good at hunting dragons, which sounds like a weird thing to say, because obviously they'll never kill the dragon. But they go in, they have, you make them a reasonably large unit, you give them a good amount of combat res, you get in there, and then you just make sure that you're, challenging, winning the challenge, double outnumbering your opponent. They auto-flee when they have to roll some dice. The dragon's quite likely to flee. Your Swift Stride, you've got a good chance of catching it. So really good piece there, but also a nice trick that you can do is, because the way a lance works, all of your models are in base-to-base contact with all of the models in the enemy fighting rank. I believe that's the specific wording. I have to double check. This didn't matter before 1.5, where fighting rank was now 2 ranks. It doesn't really matter here, but what I'm saying is, you can put, let's say you've got, 10 models, you can put all of those attacks that are on the outside of the lance, which is how this works, into the, battle standard bearer or the wizard that's in the unit, and you can just snipe out characters very, very effectively. This is just a good rule. Obviously, it's kind of hard to play around with. It's a finicky tech piece, but I like it as a finicky tech piece. So I think I'm probably going to want to put some Freeblade Knights in my list, and if I'm doing so, I really want to make sure I've got the Lance formation. I think it's a very strong upgrade. It's something I wasn't super bothered about in Bretonnia, because they, the Pegasus Knights, they can bring power in different ways. This is an army that struggles to deal with dragons. This is a way that you can deal with dragons. I think it's very good. Third up, we've got the Outlaw and Renegade. For each character in your army that has the Noble Outlaw Infamous Origin, you guessed it, 0-1 units of Hiling Outriders may have the Ambusher special rule for 1 point per model. I think this is solid. I think one of the few things that Hirelings are missing on their sheet is Ambush. It lets you keep your drops lower. You can play a list where you go with, a number of war machines. War machines obviously all drop at the same time. You can go quite heavy into ambushes between, the Hiling Outriders here in core. We've got the Brigands in rare. You can keep your number of drops lower if you want to go down that way. But also I think the Hiling Outriders are just a good unit to drop into the back line. If you're, giving them aggressive kit, you might be giving them a brace of pistols. So 12-inch range weaponry. Just being able to put them where they need to be, I think, is very, very strong. So, ambushes for 1 point per model, pretty happy with it. And it's also very cheap. By the time you load these things out, sure, you can go super cheap, and I like them at 13 points a model with just a short bow and reserve move. By the time you give them, a good armor save, the bracer pistols, they're up to 22 something points like that. So 1 point per model, not going to break the bank. Last, but certainly not least, we have the Wandering Duelist. Joking, it is the least. I hate this rule. And by hate, I mean, I don't think it's good. For if you've got the Wandering Diestro Infamous Origin, the one that gives you a rule that may or may not have some rules text missing, 0 to 1 unit of Border Prince Brigands have +1 to the weapon skill, which is nice for 2 points per model. In addition, once per game, models within this unit may make enemy models direct their attacks against them during the combat phase, rerolling their hits. I butchered how I said that. Basically, once per game, you've got to reroll your hits against me. With the way that this works in Old World, these sorts of rules where you declare that you're rerolling your hits, or, you know, you declare that some sort of bonus like that, you can just wait to see what your opponent's rolled and then go, oh, actually, I'm going to use my once per game buff here. With it being quite a squishy unit, realistically, you're just going to use this the first time someone goes into you, because likely, if you don't do that, your unit will die. But it's a little bit flexible, so that's cool. I don't love this. I think it's quite expensive for what you get, and the +1 to the weapon skill sounds good, but I'm not super in love with what you can equip the Brigands with in combat. So, yeah, I think it's fine. It's a fluff choice, I think, more than anything else, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's a combo that I'm missing, so if there is, please do let me know. Give me a shout out. What's the combination here that you're seeing that I'm not seeing? With all of that out the way, let's have a look at the actual units you get. So starting off, we'll go through all of them, even the ones that have previously existed, because we want to look at them in the context of this army. But we'll start off with the Renegade Lords, and we've got the Renegade Prince at 75 points and the Renegade Captain at 35 points. What are you noticing here? It is that it is cheap. Cheap is the name of the game with this Arcane Journal. You can go lots and lots of units. Now, you've got basically a human stat line. Weapon skill 6, 4s across the board, 3 wounds, initiative 5, 4 attacks, and leadership 8. It's not an inspiring profile, but it is only 75 points. And if you wanted to give it, you know, a +1 leadership buff, you could go up to 95 or 100 points, and suddenly you've got a leadership 9 captain, or general, sorry, which I think is a pretty solid place to sit. That feels pretty decent. Something interesting to note is obviously, well, not obviously, but as we'll go through, some of the it'll tell you what to convert units out of. One of the things that it describes maybe converting models out of is the Illyrian Reaver kit. So if you look at this in terms of like, this is a prince, an elf prince, then the stat line kind of looks sense. You're like, okay, yeah, so weapon skill 6, strength and toughness 4, man, it's a beefy prince, 3 wounds, cool, 3 attacks, initiative 5. I can almost feel good about it. Anyway, not a melee character. That's probably not what we're looking for here. Equipment, all of the stuff you'd expect to see. Great Weapon, Halberd, Lance, and Morningstar, which means that it's Great Weapon, Halberd, and Lance. You can take ranged weapons as well if you want to. Warbow, crossbow, pistol, bracer pistols. These are all fine. I think bracer pistols, if you're going for joining a unit of the Hireling Outriders, is the one that jumps out for me. You can take a shield, you can upgrade to heavy armor and full plate armor, and you can be mounted. See below, there must be a whole host of options to see what we can be mounted on. Finally, you can get 100 points of magic items for the prince and 50 points for the captain, and you can be mounted on... Oh, you can be mounted on a Barded Warhorse. Okay. There is a whole 2 options. So there's, for some reason, it's called Barded Warhorse here. Nope, it's Warhorse or Barded Warhorse. They should have just called it Warhorse. Another failure of copy editing. What a shame. So this is nice though, because we've got 2 sets of rules. Both of them have counter charge and first charge, which is interesting because you would expect to not have counter charge or first charge on the regular Warhorse. I can't remember off the top of my head if the Empire version has this, but what this means is you can go for a character that jumps on the back of a Warhorse and joins the Hireling Outriders and is aiming to be a shooting unit. But if you ever need to go into combat, you can use first charge. You can use that to maybe win a fight that your opponent is not expecting you to be able to, bringing to bear a unit with, heavy armor and bracer pistols. So they've got some attacks in there, but they're stripping away the rank bonus. So actually, all of those attacks really are meaningful. Is it a major thing? The other rules that are important to know here. Rallying Cry is obviously nice just in terms of this is the sort of army that might want to be fleeing from charges a lot, fire and flee with some pistols, something like that. So having the ability to rally before the rally step. If you've got a wizard in the unit, that unit's then going to be able to cast its enchantment and hex spells, when normally you have to rally after that part of the command phase. Veteran, really solid, just nice to have. gives you flexibility. You know, getting a reroll in there is nice. If you put any items on there that, you know, ask you to roll on leadership, which the only one I can think of off the top of my head is the Falcon Horn, which you would get veteran for anyway. Never mind, veteran is just nice to have, but then also warband, increasing your leadership by up to 2. So you could, if you're in a ranked up unit, you are getting up to leadership 10, which is very nice, giving you rerolls on the charges as well. All of this I think is pretty solid. So you can't do anything massive with this unless I'm missing some wacky combos, and if I am, please do let me know, because I love a wacky combo. But really, we've just got a human on a horse who's pretty budget, comes with some good rules, and has some good upgrades available to them. Hold the line is the rule that you get on the Empire generals, the commanders and generals. It basically just gives you auto pass panic tests for this character and any unit they've joined. It's a pretty good rule. You're paying 20 points to get access to, you know, the Empire magic items, basically, but on top of that you're getting +1 ballistic skill and you're getting auto pass panics. I think this is really solid. I just like it as an all-round package. The second character that we can take is the Outcast Wizard. This comes from the Bretonnian Arcane Journal. It is exactly as you'd expect for a wizard. You know, it's a poor stat line, but that's fine. You're not expecting it to do much. Only leadership 7, but you're probably going to buy an upgrade for it, and if you do, it's probably going to get up to leadership 8. 45 points base, and it goes up to 105 points if you make it a level 3 wizard. It is, I think, the cheapest level 3 wizard in the game. It is dazzlingly cheap. It does come with a slight downgrade in that it is an untutored Arcanist, so when you miscast, you roll an extra d6 and you discard the highest result. If you've got multiple wizards, this is maybe not as much of a downside as you might expect. Yes, you're more likely to blow up and do damage to yourself and people around you, but you're less likely to accidentally end your magic phase because you're, oh no, oops, my first spell of the turn I miscast and I rolled an 11. Oh no, no more spells for me. So, Untutored Arcanist is a downside-ish, but it's flexible, and you do also come with Magic Resist 1, which is really nice. Your level 3 wizard is now sort of, I would say, the gold standard for what we expect to see in 1.5. I don't feel like you need to be level 4. Having the level 4 option would be nice, but it's a level 3 wizard with Magic Resist 1, and it can take 75 points of magic items, and it can choose from almost every, you know, base lore in the game. Battle magic, great, love that. Give me Fireball, give me Arcane Urgency, give me Oaken Shield, amazing. Demonology, I want to juice up a unit. I want to go Steed of Shadows for an infantry unit. I want to go for Demonic Vessel, Demonic Vigor, love that. Dark Magic, amazing. Give me Word of Pain so I can debuff them for -1 strength and toughness. Give me Battle Lust. I'm going to be hitting them really hard. I've only got 1 attack on a lot of my stuff, so giving them Frenzy and Hatred is really, really strong. Elementalism. I want to go heavy on the shooting. Plague of Rust, love that. Plague of Rust, such a good spell. Dropping their armor save by 2 is just going to synergize with all of the like high volume of output but quite low quality of the things that you can bring in this Arcane Journal. Other than that, Earthen Ramparts, a spell that people love for their Death Stars. Also, the you know, this army is one that actually kind of benefits from using the teleport spell, whose name has completely gone from me. I was going to call it Walk Between Worlds, but it's not. Never mind. Elementalism, the teleport spell, pretty solid. Illusion, really good. Glittering Robes, you're probably going to be skirmish in this army with a lot of things. Getting an additional -1 to be shot, or just an additional -1 in combat, very good. It's a control piece. You can Miasmic Mirage, you can cast Column of Crystal. These are really great spells to have in this sort of army where you're going to struggle to kill things as fast as you might want to. Being able to slow them down with a column, stop them from charging you, stop them from marching with Miasmic Mirage, really, really valuable. You can also try and do some sort of Spectral Doppelganger. Maybe that's the only way that you can make a good combat character in this army. Do I think this makes a good Spectral Doppelganger caster? No. I have 2 wounds, strength 3 base, 1 attack. This would concern me. Maybe there's a combo here. We'll have to have a look into that. Finally, Necromancy. This is the one that I think is least beneficial for you, but I still think it's pretty good. There's a good magic missile in there. You know, it's Vile Tide, Light, Unquiet Spirits. You can give a single character the ability to fly around, which is really solid, although less important in this army because you've got reserve move on your horses. Nice and easy. You can drop enemy leadership, so if you're trying to do panic shenanigans, you can do. Again, Necromancy, less interested in that one, but it's fine to have, and it's something to be aware of. Finally, you can be mounted on a warhorse, which I can't remember off the top of my head what it has. Fast Cav, Swift Stride. Cool. Yep, that's fine. It doesn't give us anything particularly exciting. It's just cheap. Not as good as the warhorse that we're getting here for the the Renegade Lords. These ones, for some reason, just have extra rules on them. We don't get that because of, you know, no odd copywriting for Outcast Wizards. But yeah, I think they're a really good package. I think you're going to be running 3 of these in all of your Renegade Sellsword lists, realistically. Moving on to the core, we've got the Sellsword Infantry, which is sellswords and veteran sellswords. As a reminder, you can have uncapped amounts of sellsword infantry, and you can have 0 to 1 per 1,000 points of veteran sellswords. Are they good? Oh, yeah, they're good. They're so good. I did a whole video talking about them. It was on a headset microphone. Apologies for the slightly crunchier audio there. But this unit is very, very good. I really like them. 4 points per model at the base level is super cheap. Look at all of the upgrades they can take. If you want to go for just like a cheap veteran state troop equivalent, veteran sellswords, 5 points per model. Let's give them heavy armor and shields. That gets them up to 8 points per model, and then full command. You can't put the Griffin banner on them, so you'd have to put your BSB in there, because this unit can... Sorry. This army only gets core magic items unless you do some upgrades for characters specifically. But, reminder, they're super cheap. You can make veteran state troops that have leadership, the leadership's worth, that are 8 points, so the same points cost as you're going to be going with the veterans, but they've got a 4-up save against shooting and a 3-up save in combat. They will be immune to first charge. They will be heavy infantry, so you only need to be 4 wide if you want to like skimp out a little bit. I think this unit is incredible. I really, really like it. Other things that we can do, obviously, again, I went over this in the full video if you want to look at more examples, but you can take armored crossbows or armored handguns, and I think that's an interesting way to go. Just for, 4 points base for the sellswords. Let's say we're going handguns, because I think handguns are generally a better weapon. Handguns and shields, that takes you up to 8 points per model, but you've got a 5-up save against shooting and a 4-up save in combat. You can go a couple of ranks there, maybe put a banner in there, the sort of thing that's going to charge you solo, so you can't be charged by stuff like warhounds or enemy-like cavalry. You're going to stand and shoot them. You're probably going to win in combat because you've got a 4-up armor save, you've got 2 ranks of attacks, because realistically I think you go something like 16 in a couple of ranks. Or if you see enemy dragons, you maybe go 4x4, they charge you, they lose to combat res massively. This just feels like a really solid way to do a shooting unit that can stand up to some level of enemy output. Do they die to focused resources? Yes. Are you happy if your opponent puts focused resources into your unit that's 8 points per model? If you're taking 16 of them, we're talking... that is 130 odd points, 140 by the time you put some command in there? Sure. You send the Pegasus Knights towards them. I can live with that. That's not the end of the world. So yeah, I think this is a really solid way to buy units. If we're talking about how you're going to score your points, maybe in terms of the central point, you're going to go for a big Griffin banner unit of veteran sellswords. One of the off objectives, when I say objectives, obviously I'm talking about the strategic locations. Maybe you're going to hold some 8-point models on the off objectives. They can sit there, they can rack up 30 points a turn. It's really hard to get rid of them with enemy shooting because they've got a 5-up save. Yeah, I think this is a very solid unit. You can also do the greatswords. We talked a little bit about greatswords. Yes, of course, they're strength 3 instead of strength 4. Sure, but you can give them great weapons and full plate and shields, so they've got a 3-up save against shooting. Or if you just need to tank enemy output for a turn, you can just go, okay, come into my 3-up save. That's absolutely fine. You can do a lot of good stuff with them. Really benefits from having a demonology wizard in with them. Seed of Shadows. Maybe you just park in front of your enemy. They charge you. You tank them on your hand weapons and shields. Next round of combat, cast Demonic Vessel. Get that plus strength. Get that plus AP. Get that extra attack. And just go, I'm going to cleave through you with the great weapons now. Yeah, I think this is a really solid unit. I am definitely going to be building lists around this very heavily. The only thing I'm more excited about in core than this unit is not the next unit, but the unit after this. I cannot overstate how good the core is in this Arcane Journal, in this Army of Infamy. It is so good. It's so worth building around. I think when I'm writing lists, I'm likely going to be putting something close to 700 to 900 points worth of core in. You're going to struggle to fill the rest of your army a lot of the time with, I can take 2 bombards. Amazing. That's 200 points. Now what? I think it's core, and I think the core is very, very good in this book. I'm going to skip over the Freeblade Knights momentarily. We'll come back to that them at the end of the core, because they straddle core and special. But Hireling Outriders is the other core unit that I think is absolutely incredible. Now, their stat line is a little underwhelming. If you're comparing them to Outriders or the Empire Road Wardens, that's the unit I'm looking for. They have ballistic skill 3, and that sucks, don't get me wrong. They have worse ballistic skill, and you can't do the things that Nolan can do, where you stack, you know, a character with squint-offens on there. You've got a great long-range weapon that doesn't take like penalties for moving and shooting because of the army rules. There's nothing like that here. But what you have is at base an 11-point fast cav unit that is completely naked, that can cap, well, not cap, you can buy reserve move. That's 0 to 1 unit per 1,000, so 2 units I'm going to be putting in every list will have reserve move, just incredible stuff. You can also give them other rules as well if you care about. I'm less bothered. But then you've got a whole host of upgrades. Do you want to just be nice and cheap? You can go short bows for a point per model and reserve move for a point per model. That is 13 points per model. That comes in at, what, 65 points for 5 models that can run around and score? I'll even throw in a 6th model, you know. Let's go up to 78 points. This unit is basically the mounted yeoman that you see, you know, Bretonnian Exiles players using. The event that I won with Bretonnian Exiles semi-recently, I had, was it 1 or... I think I had 2 units of those. 2 units of 6 just running around being absolute MVPs, making sure that I was scoring points turn after turn after turn. Really love them. Great. What else can we do with them? Well, you can be more armored than enemy Outriders or enemy Pistoliers, because you can, sorry, Empire, not enemy. You can give them heavy armor and shields. That is 4 points per model, but that only takes you up to 15 points. 15 points before weapons, sure, but you've got a 4-up save, which is really solid. Then you've got to talk about the upgrades that you're looking for. Now, you can only take one of the following weapons, which is a downside. I would like to take Cav Spears and Short Bows. That would be probably the way that I'd upgrade them if I could do that. But you can only go for one of them. So at that point, the 6 points for Brace of Pistols becomes a little bit more appealing, in my opinion. Why? Brace of Pistols, not only is it 2 pistol shots, so 12-inch range, strength 4, AP 1, armor bane 1, quick shot on there as well. Multiple shots too, so you're taking a penalty from the second shot, but just generally quite a good profile to have. It also gives you an additional hand weapon attack in combat. So you can charge in and make 3 attacks between the Outriders, 2 attacks, and the Warhorse. That's alright. That's fine. That's quite a nice multi-purpose piece of output. I think that's okay. Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways to build these, and I think people are going to take them in very, very different directions. Do you want to give them light armor, heavy armor, shields? I think it depends. If you're keeping them cheap and cheerful, if you're just going short bows and nothing else, apart from reserve move, I think you're super happy just to keep them naked, keep them super cheap. Sure, if your opponent puts some focus into them, they're going to die. But if your opponent puts focus into them when they've got the 4-up save, they might not die, but they'll get below scoring anyway, so I'm not super worried about that. This is personal preference. There are a lot of ways to build them. However, you can go, and I quite like this build, where you go the full, you know, Brace of Pistols, heavy armor, shields, so we're up to 21 points here. We'll give them reserve move as well, and we'll give them feigned flight. 24 points there. That's really solid. That's a really good unit. It's a 4-up save against enemy shooting or in combat as well, I guess. If you get close, you can unload your pistols. You're able to move up more with impunity. You know, you're not super worried about long-range penalty because you can move within 6 and then you can move 8 inches away with a reserve move. This is just a really solid unit, in my opinion. I think they're very, very solid. I've said solid twice. They can take and play in multiple different ways, and I think a good general is going to use these to very high effect. The 3rd and 4th unit of them, I think, is less exciting because you can't do long range with them. You can't give them a weapon that's over 12-inch range that matters, or, you know, short bows. You can technically give them, which is an 18-inch range weapon. I'm a lot less happy about giving them an 18-inch range weapon and not having reserve move, because that's grounds to be shot back. So I think this might be a 2 units of Hireling Outriders in every list, but I'm not 100% sure what loadout is going to be best. And I think there's going to be multiple competing units that can do a good job. The 2 units that we can take from the Empire Forces of Fantasy book in core are the Militia and the Archers. I've already mentioned I don't really think Militia are very good. If you compare them to the Sellswords, the only thing that they have over them is Impetuous. No, they come with throwing weapons and hand weapons, which is cool, but I would rather just have hand weapon shield in this meta. getting that parry save I think is really valuable, and throwing weapons, it's only ever going to be the front rank that's actually shooting. I don't think makes that much difference. So militia, not for me. Really just a fluff choice, I think, and they do fit in thematically very well with what you might want to put in. However, archers I really like. Archers are 7 points per model, so they're not too expensive. They come with warbows. Now, warbows are an interesting piece of equipment. They're worse than longbows for most armies, and a lot of the time you'd rather have longbows or maybe even shortbows so you can move and shoot without penalty. However, they're strength user, and that means that you can do something interesting with a demonology caster. If you put the demonology caster in, you cast demonic vessel, the one that gives you plus strength, AP, and attacks. Now the attack goes to waste, but your strength goes to 4, and your warbow is strength user, so you just get to use your strength 4 shot. But it also increases the AP of your weapons, so you'd have a strength 4 AP 1 shooting attack. You also, in Demonology, have Steed of Shadows, so you can cast Steed of Shadows and give your unit a 12-inch fly move. Is this something that I'm excited to use? Not necessarily. Is it something I think is kind of interesting? Yeah, I do think it is kind of interesting. If there was a way to give this unit reserve move as well, I think then I'd be sold on it. But, yeah, that's just something you can do with the combination of a warbow unit and a demonology caster that not many armies in the game are able to do. And since they're skirmish, you're able to position to get as many shots as you want. You're not hindered, you know, in the way that the previous shooting units are. Now, if we're just using them normally, which is probably what I'm expecting to use, I'm looking to spend probably about 70, call it 94 points. I'm going to get 14 of them. I'm not really worried about giving them fire influence or scouts. I don't care too much about a unit champion. I'm taking them to hold and off objectives, stand there, skirmish. I've talked about this before. They do have competition in the sellswords that you give armor and a ranged weapon. I think do a very similar sort of job quite well, but these things are good. They've got move through cover. They've got Vanguard as well, so they can move forwards. If you want to, you can put them in open order, so you can get a rank bonus if that's something that you think you're going to need to worry about, at which point you probably take your marksman as well, if you're worried about dragons or something like that. But yeah, this is just a solid skirmish unit. It is more expensive than Peasant Archers, which is my sort of baseline, this is incredible, but I still think they're pretty good, and they have some interesting angles you can play around with. Not that I think that they're necessarily the most competitive angles to build from. Last in call, we've got Freeblade Knights, and then the Veteran Freeblade Knights, which are, you know, the equivalent. They're in special, but we'll talk about them together here. I would say I'm a little underwhelmed, personally, by this unit. I feel like we're a little hard done by in comparison to the things that Empire and Bretonnians can do with their knights, but it's not the end of the world. There is some fun stuff there. So, starting off, we've got an 18-point model that has got the same stat line as an Empire, just regular knight. If we look here, 4 for weapon skill, 3s across the board, 1 wound, 1 attack, leadership 8. Same here. We're paying 18 points, they're paying 21 points. Cool. Well, what are we missing? We are missing the lances, so that takes us up to 19 points per model. Then we take shields, 20 points per model, and finally you want to upgrade your warhorse to a barded warhorse, and this is where it starts to feel a bit rough, because this takes us to 23 points per model just to get the equivalent of an Empire Knight, and they're paying 21 points for that. So I do feel a little hard done by in this case. Now, what do we get? We get close order, countercharge, first charge, swift stride, exactly the same as Empire Knight. So if you just want an Empire Knight equivalent, you're paying more for it. Sorry, Empire Knights have to pay for a lance. So are we 23 here? Is that what I just said? 18, 21, 22, 23. So we're paying 1 point per model more than the Empire Knights. It's not the end of the world, but it does feel a little bit rough. And also, you can buy Drilled and Stubborn for Empire Knights. You can't do the same here. So I feel like this is a worse version of. But, reminder, if we go back to the page here, you can see that if you do have a character with the Renegade Knight Infamous Origin, you can give them Lance Formation and Noble Disdain, taking up to 25 points per model. At that point, we're comparing directly to the Bretonnian Knights of the Realm, the Mounted Knights of the Realm, which, again, same stat line here, although better ballistic skill, not that that matters, no ranged weapon. We are missing the Blessings of the Lady, obviously. We're missing Finest War Horses. We're missing the Knight's Vow as well, although we get the equivalent to Knight's Vow, so that's not fair to say, I think. We get Finest War Horses, and we get Blessing of the Lady, and we get a pseudo Knight's Vow, but we do get Lance Formation and we are a point more per model. So we're kind of paying through, I don't want to say paying through the nose, we're paying a premium for the equivalent of a basic unit for Empire and Bretonnians. And this is a unit that I'm not super jazzed about. I think I'm still going to put it in. I think you can do good stuff with it. I think having access to Lance so that you've got an anti-dragon tool is quite important to have. I'm just a little bit underwhelmed by what the package is. Now, also, speaking of underwhelmed, the veteran free blades are the Inner Circle Knight equivalent. So they start at 22 points, you go up to a Barded Warhorse for 25, Shields and Lances 27, and then full plate takes you to 31 points. If we scroll down to the Inner Circle Knights, 29 points here with Lances for 30. So again, we're paying 1 point over the odds, and we get a very similar sort of unit, but we don't get drilled. We don't get veteran. We certainly don't get... oh, there's only got a single attack on there. For some reason in my head, Inner Circle Knights had a second attack. I've just gone through the whole edition thinking that Inner Circle Knights were better than they actually were. Not that I've ever used them. That'll probably be why I got that wrong. But okay. So they are, again, just a very similar comparison here as compared to the normal Knights. But I feel... just you're kind of missing out a little bit. The commander's cheaper, 6 points per model instead of 7. But yeah, it is lacky a little bit, and you can only take a magic standard on the veteran sellsword knight. So I think you'd still take these, but I think you just feel a little bit worse about taking them than you would in comparison to taking, you know, the regular Empire equivalent. And remember, you also can't take Knights of the White Wolf or any of those upgrades because that's an Empire specific upgrade. Moving on to the other unit in special, we've got the Border Prince Mortar, which is a mortar. That's it. 90 points, it's a mortar. I have not personally been interested in playing mortars in Old World, even post 1.5. Anyone who doesn't know, it is a strength 2 large blast template, the 5-inch blast. And it fires like a, you know, a stone thrower otherwise. It's interesting. I don't know that I'm worried about seeing them on the other side of the table, but you could take a few of them, so there's maybe an angle there. And, you know, they're pretty cheap. They're 90 points. As war machines go, relatively cost effective. And if you're trying to play the low drops game, maybe taking 3 of these and 2 cannons or 2 organ guns is a, you know, a route that you want to go down. So something to consider there. But for me, I am not interested. Maybe I'm wrong. This is one that I definitely could be wrong on, though. After our brief sojourn into special, let's have a look at rare. Now, there's 2 war machines, and then there's also the brigands. We'll look at the 2 war machines first, and we're starting off with the Border Prince's organ gun. This is an organ gun for 125 points. If you don't know what an organ gun does, it is you roll 2 artillery dice. That's how many shots you get. The profile is strength 5, AP -1, armor bane 2. It's a 30-inch range gun. The Hellblaster volley gun that you may have seen on the table, which is pretty terrifying, has more shots but less range. Now, do I like organ guns in general? Yeah, actually, I really like organ guns. I think dwarves can use them to pretty good effect. I like putting them in there. Do I want them in this army? I don't think I do, because there's no engineer. If you could bring an engineer, I think that would be very solid. But here, you're just at the mercy of... maybe I roll a misfire on one of the dice, maybe I roll a misfire on both the dice, maybe... or I get a good number of shots, but I don't have any way of increasing my ballistic skill. I think these organ guns need something to support them, and because there's no engineers here, I'm going to be missing them. That's fine. I think if you want to bring them, I don't think you're necessarily wrong to do so. The only real problem is that you can't bring them and the bombards. They're 0 to 1 per 1,000 points of this or the bombard. So if you could bring both, I probably would bring both and just roll the dice and be like, this is going to do some damage over the course of the game. But it is a case of one or the other. So I'm going to be leaving these ones on the shelf. But what I won't be leaving on the shelf is the bombard. You know you love it. This thing is absolutely incredible. It is... or it was the gold standard of cannon. Something to note before we even get into it, looking at this and the organ gun, 50 by 50 base. Why is that important? Well, it is a smaller base so that when you're playing against enemy cannons, when you're playing the cannon versus cannon who can shoot off each other's artillery turn 1 game, you are at an advantage because the base of your cannon is smaller. It's harder for your opponent to hit your cannon there. This is really nice. This is obviously a fantastic buff to have over the sort of regular 75mm long cannons there. Is it a big thing? No, but it is nice and it is worth mentioning. It's 100 points. It has the stat line of a cannon, and it is a short range cannon in that it is a 48-inch range. But remember, that's the point that you pick, that you shoot to. A cannon, you pick a point that you can see, you fire in that direction, you roll an artillery die, you add that distance to it, and then you roll another artillery die and you bounce. So the average range on a the maximum average range on a 48-inch range cannon is 60 inches, because you go an additional 6 inches on the bounce, or sorry, on the declared, and then an additional 6 inches on the bounce. So this is still very long range. It's not quite corner to corner, but you bring two, you put one on each side of the board, you're going to be able to hit things. Stat-wise, it's very good. Strength 8, so it wins almost everything in the game on 2s or better. Can't be better. On 2s. AP 3, which is very good. Armor Bane 2, so 6s means it just strips armor off basically everything. Meteoric Iron is the basically anything I'm referring to. I know if I say everything, someone in the comments just going to be like, actually, I can have a 5-up save against everything. Cannon Fire, it's just, you know, the just how it works. Cumbersome can't be... can't stand and shoot with it. You can't move and shoot, unfortunately, and it has multiple wounds D3 plus 1. So this is a very, very good cannon, but it doesn't stop there. You've probably seen it before. You've probably heard me rant and or gush about this bombard, depending on how I'm feeling on the day. The misfire table is just really dumb. It is, you will never lose more than one round of shooting from the bombard unless it's destroyed by rolling a 1. So, on a 1, models destroyed. This is normal. This is what I expect. 2 through 3, you can't shoot this turn. You lose a wound on the crew. You can shoot next turn, though. Great stuff. Love that. Also, losing a wound on the crew is not really a penalty. If you get charged in combat, which is where the crew's wounds matter, you're going to die anyway, realistically. What this means is, I can lose a wound from this malfunction and then be shot by an enemy cannon and still have a chance of living. So that's really, really nice. 4 to 5, you can't shoot this turn. No other penalty. Fantastic. Okay, I'll give up 1 turn of shooting. 6, you can't shoot next turn. You lose the shooting next turn, which feels weird because 6 is theoretically the best result. Never mind, you still get to roll this turn. You shoot as if you rolled a 2 on the artillery die rather than a misfire. Great. If you're talking about shooting this at like something on a 50 by 100 mil base, that is 100 mil is 4 inches effectively. So you only need to roll a 4 on the dice to hit the thing that you were shooting at on the bounce. That's most of the things, you know, you've got a 4 in 6 chance that you're going to be hitting the target you shot, even though you misfired. That is crazy good. I don't need to rant about that for too long. It's just something that's worth recognizing as a very, very solid piece. There are 100 points each. You're going to start with 2 in your list. Amazing. No more notes. Last in rare slot, we've got the Brigands, and these things are, I think, good here. They were confused, in my opinion, for Bretonia, but I think in this list they have a really good role to play. Now, they're super cheap to start off with, but they get expensive as you go. They come as a unit of 10, and they're 4 points per model. They've got a human stat line across the board, leadership 6, which is fine. They can come in open order, or you can upgrade that to either be close order or skirmish. I like skirmish most of the time, but I can see a reason for, open order. They come with Horde and Warband, which is the main reason that I would see them being in open, or maybe even close order, but likely open order. They also have Motley Crew, so you can mix and match their equipment, and they are also levies, so they're not going to cause panic in other things, but they can't use the general's leadership or your BSP reroll, sure, and they're impetuous. That is the big downside. However, you can give them ambushes, so impetuous kind of matters less. If you're coming into the background and all you're doing is you're saying, hi, I'm going to come in and shoot you, and then if I charge your war machine that I've appeared behind because I didn't manage to finish off in the shooting phase, that's fine by me. I think this is a pretty solid spot for them. So, what can they be equipped with? They come with hand weapons and light armor, which is fine. You can give them a shield for a point per model. Amazing. Remember, they have Motley Crew. You only have to give half of them shields to get the benefit. Quite nice there. You can, in terms of melee weapons, this is where I think they're really lacking. You can give them additional hand weapons, and that's it. You can give Outcast Wizards ambush, have them come in together. You roll Demonology on the next turn and come in with like 3 attacks at Strength 4 AP1, and that sounds good, but the opportunity cost feels very high, and there's a lot of moving parts there, and it can definitely go wrong. And also, you're coming in from the backboard edge. walking forwards 4 inches, your opponent can either run away from you or maybe just shoot you off the board or charge you. So I don't love that as a plan, but I do like them coming in with some sort of ranged weapon. What ranged weapons do we have? Probably not crossbow. If we're ambushing, crossbows are bad. You're going to be -2 to hit because you moved. Pistols are okay. I don't hate the pistols. Only a single shot is... it's fine. It's fine. Blunderbuss is also something to consider. So I think it comes down to pistol or blunderbuss, realistically. Pistol, single shot at strength 4 AP1, quick shot so you don't have a penalty for moving, but you'll probably take a penalty for long range. Blunderbuss, D3 shots, strength 3 AP1, you don't take penalty for long range, multiple shots, or stand and shoot. This is okay. The volley fire kind of doesn't matter, because if you're ambushing, you're always counting as moving, so you don't get to volley fire. Yeah, I think I like the blunderbuss here. It is expensive at 4 points per model, but I think there's definitely some sort of, some level of scope to play around with. Maybe we've got some, 10 blunderbuss coming in the back line, wanting to threaten an enemy baggage train, wanting to threaten enemy, whatever it is that's in the back line that you're happy to sit there. I think it's an interesting build that you can play around with. You can also have 2 units with skirmishers, which means you can have 2 units with ambushes if you want to. It's a rare slot unit, so you're capped at 2 units anyway at 2,000 points. Yeah, I think it's interesting. You can also put magic items on the Desperado, which in other armies is more useful than here, in my opinion, because you can take lots of cheap characters in this army. So having a magic item caddy is less useful, but maybe there's something that you want to bring in. I'm not thinking... Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything that would be amazing to have on a unit champion that would be from the core items only. Yeah, nothing comes to mind, but I guess you could just give them some sort of magic weapon, but that's going to get quite expensive quite quickly. When the magic weapon's going to be about as expensive as the rest of the unit, that's something I'm a little bit leery of, I would say. Let's have a quick run through on the mercenaries you can take. These are the ones that are specifically labeled as Dogs of War. So when you go down here, Dogs of War is what you're looking for. And there are, I believe, 4. There's the Bone Grinder Giant, there are the Empire Ogres, the Imperial Dwarves, and then also the Doom Seekers as well. I don't think there's anything else, but again, please let me know in the comments if I've missed one. I'm going worst to best in my opinion. I don't think the Bone Grinder is good. It is very, very squishy. It's a 8 wound model, yes. It's toughness 6 and it's 300 points, but it has no defense. It's got light armor and nothing else. You put this in your list because you want to play the big model, and if that's what you want to do, great. Go ahead, have fun. I don't think we need to discuss it in terms of competitive viability or what role it plays in the army, because you're not putting it in for that reason. You're just putting it in because you want to have it in, and if that's what you want to do, cool, great. I think that's good, and people should play the things that they want to, the things that they enjoy. Moving on to the second best, I've got these out of order. I think the second worst, in my opinion, is the Imperial Dwarf Mercenaries. Remember, they're mercenaries, so they're not scoring. You can't use them to hold objectives, and I think in some worlds this unit is not bad. I don't think it's a bad unit, in fact. Your toughness 4, you can get up to heavy armor and shields. You can have a 3-up armor save. You can give them drilled veteran. You can give them standard runes. Because they're mercenaries, they still get to take magic items or runes from their own book, which I think is interesting. But I think they are very confused in what they want to do for the Renegade Crowns army, because the Renegade Crowns can just take the veteran sellswords, which can do a very similar job. Do you want a unit that's very tanky, that can have a ranged weapon? Yes, we can do that with sellswords. Do you want a unit that can, take a beating for a low cost? Yes, you can go with, heavy armor and shield. There are some rules in here that are, things that you don't get. Shield wall is very nice to have. Drilled veteran, all of these things are nice. Magic resist 1 is good. Resolute, so you don't flee as far as... It can be good, can be bad. But I just don't think, for me, it crosses the Rubicon into something that I want to put into my list. I can see why people would, especially if you're playing more of a Dogs of War theme. This unit feels very, I'm putting Dogs of War flavor into my army. But I think in terms of, does it have a competitive place in the list? Not so much. Again, it's like the Bone Grinder. You're putting it in because you want to put it in. But I think these are just a bit better than the Bone Grinder in that row. Then we've got Imperial Ogres, and this is the unit where I'm starting to go, maybe there's something here. And the reason I say that is that you can they're doing something that the rest of the list doesn't do. I still don't know that I love them, but you can't take monstrous infantry anywhere else in the book. And you're a little bit stuck for going for things that are able to do good damage. Now, Imperial Ogres have some issues, but if you cast Battle Lust on them, suddenly that weapon skill 3 is a lot less important. You can go, 31 points base, you upgrade them to heavy armor for 3 points, up to 34 points, and then maybe you give them a great weapon, 38 points per model. You can get, they've got Motley Crew, they've got impact hits, they have some AP in the charge. If you go long enough, they can have ranged weapons in the light cannon. I don't know that I love the light cannon. If you're in a meta where you've got low to moderate toughness units with poor armor saves but have multiple wounds, I'm not 100% sure what that is. Maybe you play into someone who has a lot of snotlings and you want to deal with high quantity of wounds. Maybe the light cannon does a good job here, where you've got oh sorry, it's armor bane too, it's not even multiple wounds too. Yeah, I'm not. These are fine, they're okay. I think I'd rather give them a good weapon, and at 8 points per model I'm not jazzed to be paying 39 points or 42 points for a unit with a light cannon. But I think if you're looking for some monstrous infantry, if you want something with a little bit more beef, I can see using them with great weapons, heavy armor, casting Battle Lust on them, and just having a unit that can punch relatively hard, whereas you might be struggling for something that can punch, super hard with the rest of your army. So I think this maybe has a little bit of a use case here where the other two so far haven't. Last, and the opposite of least, we've got Doomseekers. Do I like Doomseekers? I kind of do like Doomseekers. Why? Because they are the only half-decent combat character you can make. They do have their own issues. They're a little bit slow getting there. They can't join units. But they have a lot of rules, and there's a lot of upgrades that you can put on them that I think makes them very interesting. So Doomseekers are something that I definitely consider, given how cheap they are, how that you can tool them up, and how they actually have some reasonable punch. What do you get for it? Well, a Doomseeker is a character that doesn't give up points if it dies, so straight away, that's pretty solid. What you will find is that some good players are able to just avoid killing it, depending on what the army matchup is, but if you put them forward aggressively, it is a little bit hard to avoid them, especially if you're playing into like a gun line or something like that. If they're able to just run at your opponent, they have the choice of either killing them and not getting the points, or not killing them, getting charged by a little, orange naked whirlwind that's just going to rip through an infantry unit. So yeah, they're interesting. They're very customizable. They come with a lot of rules. First the fray, so they increase their charge range by 3 and get plus D3 inch modifier in the result. So that means that even though they only march 6 inches, they still have a little bit more flexibility there. Whirlwind of Death is good. You get impact hits that always wound on a 4+, or everything always wounds on a 4+, which is quite nice. So you can go heavy on the number of attacks, and they've got impact hits here, and their impact hits are done with the hand weapon, the Whirling Blades of Death that they've got, and you can put the weapon runes on them there as well. Not only do you get weapon runes that you can put on these, you also get the runic tattoos. You can take up to 3 of these. There's some combos that, dwarf players have figured out by now, but there's a lot of different stuff that you can do. They're very customizable. One of the funniest ones, in my opinion, Rune of Endless Battle. Each time it does an unsaved wound, you get to make an additional attack. And the additional attacks also make additional attacks. You don't get them from impact hits, but you just get to keep going and going and going. It's kind of like the Bone Giant, but on a model that is easier to actually do something with. So I think that's worth playing around with. There's other bits and pieces. You get you can go for additional attacks with Frenzy, and you get +1 to hit, but enemies hit you back better. That's fine. You want to go in and do some damage and then die, that's super fine. You can give them Hatred. You can get extra attacks here to stack on top. You can get plus toughness if you want to just do something dumb and try and be a really beefy boy who just doesn't fall over to enemy shortbow shots, for example. So yeah, really interesting stuff that you can do there, and you still get 50 points of weapon runes that you can put various bits and pieces, such as the Master Rune of Alric the Mad that gives you no armor saves against these attacks. So loads of stuff you can do with these, and I think they're very fun and good to build. And I don't know what the perfect build for these is. I tell you what, mid-video shout-out or end-of-video shout-out, if you're curious, Dowie After Dark has probably talked about them a million times, because they're one of the more interesting things that you can find. So if you have specific dwarf questions, that might be the place to look to see if it's been answered previously. As a reminder, I've said it a couple of times, you don't get any special magic items for this detachment. You can only take the core magic items unless you take the 2 upgrades that let you pick from Bretonia or Empire. So let's have a quick flick through the Force of Fantasy book and then also each Arcane Journal and just pick out a few items that I think are worth considering. Now, first of all, Armor of Tarnus you unfortunately can't take for your wizard because it can only go on Imperial wizards. Just worth pointing out because I know it's something that people are going to miss and it's definitely something that is worth knowing. But first good item, Griffin Standard. Put it on your BSB, incredible stuff. You can get really good mileage out of that on the veteran sellswords especially. Really happy to have that there. The White Cloak, it's just a talisman of protection that's better against flaming attacks. I'm not upset at seeing that. If you want to go for a second ward save, remember that you have got that one there. And then we've got all of the arcane items. Empire is a treasure trove of incredible magic items, specifically arcane items. Book of Ashur is fine. It is okay. It's 85 points, so we can't actually take it. Never mind. Didn't want it anyway. But Wizard's Familiar. You can take multiple of these across your army, 0 to 1 per model, but because you've got 75 points of magic items, if you wanted to, you could take this on a couple of wizards very comfortably. Getting +1 to your dispel rolls is just very solid. Makes you much more able to stop enemy spells. Anyone who's played against, Skull Staff, anything that gives you plus modifier to dispel knows that it's incredibly frustrating to play against. Also, on top of that, we've got the Wizard Staff. This is very good. It gives you +1 to cast Assailment or Magic Missiles. Now, you need to have, if you're going to go for this, reliable access to a magic missile. How are we doing that? We can just be, we're outcast wizards, we can be demonology. Your casting, it's a 9 to cast the summoning, which is 18-inch range, strength 4, AP 1, 2d6 hits. Pretty good magic missile. What if you were casting it and you got +1? So you only need to roll a 6 on the dice. Suddenly feeling a lot more comfortable with that. Also, another item that you can combo with is in the Empire Arcane Journal, if we just have a look there. Tome of Midnight, very, very good. Gives you +1 to cast if you're casting Demonology, Dark Magic, or Necromancy spells, and it also gives you +1 spell known, so you might just get something good in there. It does come with Loner, which is a little bit of a problem, because I think this army really likes having their wizards in units because of the reserve move that comes with the Hireling Outriders, but if you're looking for a third wizard, having +2 to cast on the summoning on top of the +2 to cast that you normally have, not a bad shout at all. Other than that, you could go with Twin-Tailed Wand if you wanted to just squeeze some more range damage out. Twin-Tailed Wand and the Wizard's Familiar, I think it's called. I've now forgotten. Wizard's Staff. 60 points gets you there. You could put it on a level 1 or a level 2 outcast wizard. You're going to be casting Demonology on you need to roll a 7 on the dice, but you get 2 chances to cast it. That feels pretty solid. And then also, I guess you could Crystal Ball, but I don't see any reason to. There are some other really nice items in here, though, and I'm thinking mostly the Bound Spell. Ring of Tal, 20 points for a single once per game Oaken Shield at Bound Spell level 3, giving your entire unit a 5-up ward save at a key point. That is pretty solid because you might not want to go into Battle Magic. You might want to go into Demonology for a lot of the benefits that you can get. So just having a single turn of, say you've gone for a unit that you're going to fly up the board with Steed of Shadows, just going, let's make sure that they're a little bit more resilient. They're not going to fall over immediately when I get charged. Having that's quite nice in the back pocket. We've also got Twice Blessed Armor, which is full plate, that obviously you can't put on your wizards, but it gives you Hammer Hand every turn, Bound Spell, Power Level 2. This feels really solid. This is something I'm very happy to put on my captains. Speaking of captains, if I'm putting them in units, Witch Hunter Ward, Magic Resist 2, great. You also get a reroll a failed single armor save roll once per game. I forget that a lot of the time because the Magic Resist 2 for 20 points is so good that that's all that I was taking it for in the first place. There are a couple of banners in here as well. I think the Griffin banner is so good that we probably just default to that. But you can, if you wanted to, you could go for Unbreakable. Oh, I guess not because it's Order of the Panther only. You could go for Sigma's Triumph to get reroll 1s on your knights if you were going for something a little bit more aggressive. Or you could give a unit Fear. Sure. Big bricks of infantry with Fear are mildly annoying to deal with, but again, if you're going a big brick of infantry, I'm probably thinking, let's just go for the Griffin banner. That feels a lot better. In terms of weapons, though, there is at least one weapon in here that is half decent, and that is the Pearl Daggers that I like. Now, Hammer of Righteousness is very good as well. Do I think you should go Hammer of Righteousness and try and do a spectral doppelganger caster. Not really, because you're only rolling 3 spells, so you're quite unlikely to get spectral doppelganger, so 50-50. But pearl daggers I quite like if you want to give one of your characters a little bit more punch, because it gives you extra attacks d3 and you reroll your failed hit rolls. So you go from 2 attacks that hit on 3s, let's say you're getting 1.3 hits, to average of 4 attacks hitting on 3s re-rolling. Suddenly you're getting a lot more hits there. It's only strength user AP1, but it just adds a little bit more oomph if you're going for something. You know, if you want to have a character in with your, let's say, your Hireling Outriders that also not only wants to be able to shoot, wants to be able to come in and get into combat and reliably kill cannons and stuff like that, where you've got small frontage, you don't actually get to have too many models in base-to-base contact with them. Moving over to Bretonnians, we have one banner here in the Force of Fantasy that I think is interesting. Errantry banner, if you weren't going for that Griffin banner combo, which I still think is probably the best thing you can do, but if you wanted to go more heavy on knights, you could go with the Errantry banner, getting +1 strength on the charge. You do get impetuous, so it is a little bit risky, but, you know, if you're trying to squeeze out just a little bit more ranged punch, this is the way that you do it, so I think that's fine. Banner echelons, great for Pegasus Knights, not necessarily needed for this army. Falconhorn, again, if you wanted to go for, you know, you feel like you need to turn off fly, the upgrade that lets you buy the Bretonnian magic items also gives you veteran, so you can put this on any of your characters, which feels pretty solid. Not too bad there. And then into arcane items, we've got some pretty good arcane items. If you want consistency, Sacrament of the Lady is a much better power scroll. Single use, give you +2 to cast once per game. Just nice to have. Prayer Icon of Quenelles, like the Empire version, this gives you +1 to dispel, but specifically for hexes, the advantage that you get here is that it is cheaper, but it also increases your dispel range by 3 inches. Again, if you've played against anyone who's got a 27-inch dispel range, you know that it is incredibly annoying to play against, so really solid stuff there. Moving on to the Bretonnian Arcane Journal. This one's a little bit more limited because this was written back at the start of the edition when Arcane Journals had a lot more items that were limited specifically to the armies that they were meant to go with. So here, there are a couple of things that I do like. Sword of the Stout-Hearted. This is where you actually would go if you went for a Spectral Doppelganger Caster. Strength +2, AP -1 for 25 points. Still leaves you points to go for a Lore Familiar and a Power Scroll, so you can actually do something with that there. I think this is a solid combo if you wanted to do that specifically, although I am worried about how squishy the wizard is. We've also got the Banner of the Lady's Grace. Probably not going for it, but it's noteworthy if you're worried about being ruined by leadership. If you only play against Vampire Counts and Tomb Kings that do leadership debuffing, maybe this is the way to go. You could also go for the... Nope, that is locked to... I was thinking the Crusaders Tapestry would be nice, but locked to the Army of Infamy there. I think that's basically it, because all of the good stuff that I'd like to take the Flame Strike Wand, but I can't because it's exiles only. And that takes us to the end of the Renegade Crowns Army of Infamy. I have a pretty high opinion of this Arcane Journal. I think it doesn't have a lot of direct power, but I think it has a lot of playmaking potential, and I think that's very interesting. I think it's going to be potentially a little bit of a harder army to use, but it has a very high skill cap. But also, if you're thinking about it from a more casual, competitive, or not even competitive, maybe just a more casual perspective, I think it's a really fun and flavorful army where you can bring all of the Dogs of War units that you have, or you can convert up, and it gives you a lot of sort of narrative storytelling potential there. So I feel like this was a really, really solid Army of Infamy. I wish it had come with more specific magic items, but other than that, I don't really have much in the way of complaints about it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for getting to the end of the video. If you've reached this point and you haven't already, I would really appreciate a like, a comment, a subscription if you haven't done those things. It just helps me get seen by more people, boost me up in the algorithm, all of the stuff that the YouTubers do like to say. If you would like to support me in my goal to become a full-time YouTuber, I would absolutely appreciate that. You can become a member below. There are various perks to those, name at the end of the videos, all that good stuff, but it also unlocks some VIP areas in Discord if you become a Longbeard or Grey Knight tier supporter. Those VIP sections are the only parts that are locked away in Discord. You don't have to be a member to join the Discord. I'd recommend that you should. We've got about 450, 500 people on there. It's a great place for discussion, a lot of fun. I do try and chime in as much as possible. And it's also where the Fix My List show lists are put, and also if you are one of the Grail Knight or Longbeard tier supporters, where you participate in choosing which list I play in the monthly Pick My List series.